Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we talk about making a good mystery great. And today I want to focus on knowing where your story goes. And I'm going to talk about pantsers and planners. It makes no difference. First, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support of this video series and my mystery writing. And if you'd like to join us and support this series, there's a link in the description below. And if you're not ready to make a continued support and you like this video, there's a link to buy me a cup of coffee, and that would be great too. All right, let's talk about knowing where your story goes. If you're a pantser or a planner, you're a writer, and you've heard these terms before. A pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. It's sometimes called discovery writing, and there's no real plan or outline in mind. On the other hand, a planner is someone who meticulously plans and outlines their story before they start writing. And both approaches have their merits. But have you ever found yourself getting lost in your own story? Maybe you started out with a clear idea of where you wanted your plot to go, but somewhere along the way, things got messy and you found yourself struggling with loose ends. That's where a story outline comes in. It's a helpful tool for both pantsers and planners. And I want to mention that many pantsers say that they have the story outline in their head. They just haven't written it down somewhere. For pantsers, you can provide a loose framework for your story, which is just what I mentioned. They have an idea in their head of where the story is going. They just don't know all the details. And that helps you keep your story on track. And for planners, an outline can help you see the big picture and make sure all your plot points are leading toward a satisfying conclusion. So we're going to talk about the benefits of using your story outline no matter what your writing style. So let's talk about the 7 story points every story writer needs to know, whether you're a pantser or a planner. And that is the loose storyline. If you're a planner, you probably already know the benefits of having a clear outline. However, it's important to keep in mind that your outline should be a loose guide rather than a rigid roadmap. So let's look at the 7 story points you want to have. And as you're writing, you head from one story point to the next story point. And I've mentioned before that as you're writing, if a character does an unplanned action, what you need to focus on is just heading toward that next story point, because our characters often tell us, they often come up with very good ideas. All right, so let's just quickly walk through them. First, there's the hook, and your opening wants to grab the reader and make them want to keep reading, and you want to introduce your detective and make sure that there's some engagement for your reader right at the very beginning. And the next important plot point is the inciting incident, and this is the event that sets that mystery puzzle in motion. So first we're going to introduce the detective, and then they're going to get your detective involved in the puzzle they need to solve in this particular mystery. It's the thing that disrupts your protagonist's normal life and sets them on this new path. Next comes the first plot point, and this is when your protagonist commits to their new plot to the new plan and starts working towards their goal. And in our case, their goal is solving the mystery. And it's a point of no return. This is the time when your detective, whether they're professional or amateur, they decide, all right, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. All right. And the midpoint is the next plot point, and this is where things start to get more complicated. Often your protagonist detective feels like they're getting nowhere. Everything that they've tried hasn't worked, and they face obstacles and setbacks that make them question whether they can even achieve what they started out to do. And then next, after the midpoint, the next big story point is the second plot point, and this is another point of no return. Uh, just like their original commitment, and your protagonist faces their biggest obstacle yet. This is oftentimes when they have a major obstacle that's been set in place by the antagonist, or depending on your story, it may even be a face-to-face meeting with the antagonist. And it should be the turning point that heads your detective on the way to the climax. And this is the moment of highest tension. This is the moment in the story where your protagonist faces their greatest challenge, and this is often where they do meet the antagonist face to face, and the antagonist threatens them in some way. All right. And the outcome is going to determine whether they actually achieve their objective, which is setting the world right for our detective. And the resolution finally at last. This is where your story wraps up. The villain is exposed, and your protagonist achieves their goal and oftentimes learns an important lesson. So if you keep those 7 story points in your mind, you can create a loose outline that guides you as you write without stifling your creativity. So let's take a look at what's in your pantser's head and what you can do to write without a formal outline. You may not have a clear idea of where your story's going when you sit down to write, and that's okay. Many writers like this discovery method because it lets them get to know their characters and plot without feeling like an outline is holding them back or cramping their creativity. However, writing without an outline can also be challenging. That's why I mentioned many pantsers, even though they don't have a formal written outline, often have an idea in their head of how the story is going to proceed. So one of the ways that you can really help develop your story is to know your characters. Really do that background development for your characters. And if you don't know where the story is going exactly, you do have a clear idea of who your characters are and how they act and what motivates them. And this will help you make decisions about their actions and reactions throughout the story. And you want to write in scenes. Scenes are the building blocks of your story. So rather than trying to write your story in a linear fashion, focus on writing individual scenes as they come to you. And you can always fill in the blanks later. And I know even many planners do this. They write their scenes out of order. And they may write a scene that comes later in the story and then go back and work on an earlier scene. So they're working scene by scene by scene. And you want to keep a loose timeline. Even if you're not outlining your story, it's helpful to have an idea of a loose timeline of events, like when the crime happened, when the crime was discovered, um, and what various suspects were doing at the time and what they do afterwards, all right? And it'll prevent you from getting lost in details if you just have that loose timeline so you know where you are in time in the story, all right? And of course, you want to stay open to new ideas. One of the benefits of discovery writing is you're open to new ideas and you stay open to new ideas. And if you get stuck, you can try brainstorming different scenarios to know what comes next in your story. Even though you're not working with an outline as a pantser, it's still important to keep that big picture in mind, the big picture, because at those story points that I mentioned, the 7 story points, that gives you a framework for getting to the end when the villain is discovered and revealed. So, whether you're a pantser or a planner, it's important to have a clear idea of where your story's going. It really is. Planners can use a loose outline as a guide, but it still will give you room for flexibility. And pantsers can focus on their characters and developing those interactions and writing in scenes, and that'll keep your story moving forward. Remember, every scene needs to move your story forward. So, either way, it's important to keep that big picture in mind and make sure all the pieces of your story come together. Okay, I hope that helps. If you have any questions about this, whether you're a discovery writer and you have the idea in your head, or whether you're a planner and you have a lot of details and you've planned out every single scene, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer questions. And I just want to say that students in the Write a Killer Mystery course understand that planning helps you write faster. We talk about that in the course, and knowing where your story is going, whether it's in your head or meticulously planned out, keeps your mystery on track. So I want to thank you for being here today. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer questions. And also, I wanted to remind everybody that Audible is a sponsor for this video series, and you can try um, listening to stories on Audible. It's a whole different experience than reading, but it's also a very engaging way to experience a story. There's a link in the description below to a 30-day free trial to Audible, so I encourage you to check it out. All right, thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe and click that little notification bell so you'll always get notified when there's another episode of Write a Killer Mystery. And in the meantime, keep writing. Thank you.